A guy wants a divorce. He tells the judge, I just can't take it anymore. Every night she's out until way after midnight, just going from bar to bar. Judge asks, what's she doing? The guy answers, looking for me. John invited his new work colleague, Robert, over for dinner. As they reached the front door, John's wife rushed out, threw her arms around him, and gave him an enthusiastic kiss. Robert, wide-eyed, turned to John and asked, Wow, how long have you two been married? 24 years, John replied. That's amazing, Robert said. You must have such a strong marriage if your wife greets you like that after all these years. John chuckled and said, Don't let the kiss fool you. Robert looked puzzled. What do you mean? John grinned and said, She only does it to make the cat jealous. An Englishman and an Irishman walk into a bakery. The Englishman, with a quick glance around, steals 3 buns and slips them into his pockets before walking out the door. He turns to the Irishman and says, That was impressive, wasn't it? It took a lot of skill and finesse to take those buns without the owner noticing. The Irishman raises an eyebrow and replies, That's nothing but simple thievery. Let me show you how to do it the honest way and still get the same result. The Irishman steps up to the bakery counter and calls out to the owner, Sir, I'd like to demonstrate a magic trick. Intrigued, the owner comes over, curious to see the trick. The Irishman asks for a bun, takes a bite, and then asks for another, eating it too. He repeats this with the 3rd bun, and after finishing, the owner, now puzzled, says, All right, where's the magic trick? The Irishman grins and points to the Englishman's pockets. Look there. The professor presented a large cage containing a male rat, which was positioned in the middle of the enclosure. Next, the professor placed a piece of cake on one side of the cage and a female rat on the other side. The male rat immediately ran toward the cake and began eating it. The professor then removed the cake and replaced it with a piece of bread. Once again, the male rat ran straight to the bread. This experiment continued, with the professor switching the food items after each trial. In every instance, the male rat focused solely on the food, never showing any interest in the female rat. The professor concluded, This experiment demonstrates that food is the greatest source of strength and attraction. At this point, a student from the back of the room raised his hand and said, Professor, why don't you try changing the female rat? This one might just be his wife. A couple rushed into town hall just as it was about to close and caught a judge on his way out. Breathless, they asked if he could marry them. Do you have a license? The judge asked. When they admitted they didn't, he sent them to the town clerk. They managed to catch the clerk just as he was locking up and quickly secured a license. Back at the judge's office, he examined the document and frowned. You've filled in your names backwards. His where hers should be and vice versa. Flustered, they ran back to the clerk, who issued them a corrected license. But when they returned, the judge noticed another problem. The date is in the wrong format. Once again, they sprinted back to the clerk. This back and forth continued through 5 revisions until, at last, the judge was satisfied. I hope you understand why I made you keep going back, he said. If the license contains errors, your marriage wouldn't be legally valid, and any children you might have would be considered technical bastards. The groom sighed. That's funny. That's exactly what the clerk called you. A blonde girl was going on her first date and her grandmother gave her some advice. The boy may try to kiss you. It will feel good, but don't do it. He may try to go up your skirt, but don't let him. And he may try to take your clothes off, but don't do it. He may try to get on top of you, but don't do it. If you do any of these things, you'll disgrace your family. The girl said she understood and went on her date. The girl came home at about 11 p.m. and her grandmother was waiting for her and said, Well, did you disgrace the family? No, said the girl. Instead of letting him do those things to me, I did them to him, and now it's his family that's disgraced. A friend of mine was telling me about the time his wife tried to leave him by writing a breakup letter after he came home late again. She left a note saying, "I've had enough and have left you. Don't bother coming after me." Then she hid under the bed to see his reaction. After a short while, my buddy comes home and she could hear him in the kitchen before he comes into the bedroom. She could see him walk towards the dresser and pick up the note. After a few minutes, he wrote something on it before picking up the phone and calling someone. "She's finally gone. Yeah, I know. About time I'm coming to see you. Put on that nightgown I like. I love you. Can't wait to see you." He hung up, grabbed his keys, and left. She heard the car drive off as she came out from under the bed. Seething with rage and with tears in her eyes, she grabbed the note to see what he wrote. "I can see your feet. We're out of bread. Be back in 5 minutes." A single man decided that life would be more exciting with a pet. He went to the pet store and told the owner he wanted something unique. After some discussion, he settled on a talking centipede, which came in a small white box that served as its home. Once home, the man decided to start their friendship by taking the centipede to church. He knocked gently on the box and asked, "Would you like to go to church with me today? It'll be fun." Silence. No response. A little puzzled, he waited a moment, then tried again. "How about coming to church with me? You'll be blessed." Still nothing. Now slightly frustrated, he waited a few more minutes before giving it one final try. This time he leaned close to the box and shouted, "Hey, do you want to go to church with me or not?" Finally, a tiny, exasperated voice came from inside the box. "For the love of God, I heard you the first time. I'm putting my shoes on." Two men were having an excruciatingly slow round of golf. The two women playing ahead of them seemed to hit every sand trap, water hazard, and rough on the course. To make matters worse, they didn't follow proper golf etiquette and let the men play through. After 2 hours of frustration, one man said, "I've had enough. I'm going to ask them to let us play through." He started walking toward the women, but halfway there he stopped, turned around, and came back. Looking embarrassed, he said, "I can't do it. One of those women is my wife, and the other is my mistress. Maybe you should go instead." The second man nodded and began walking toward the women. But just like his friend, he stopped halfway, turned around, and walked back. With a sheepish grin, he said, "Small world." A man wanted to literally die with his money. So he trusted a third of his money to a priest, a third to a doctor, and a third to his lawyer to bury him with it when he died. After his death, at the man's funeral, the priest whispered to his dead body and placed a bag in his coffin. The doctor then proceeded to whisper to the body and placed a bag in there as well. Then the lawyer went and dropped off a bag and moved on. As they were carpooling back from the funeral, the lawyer asked what the priest whispered. The priest, with tears in his eyes, said that he had to confess he spent some of the money on an orphanage so that some hungry kids would not starve, and that he feels bad for what he had done, but that he had no choice. The doctor then admits that he too had to let him know that one of his patients needed a surgery that he alone could not do, that he spent some of the money to save the person's life. The lawyer looks at them with scorn and says, "How could you? You have betrayed a man's last and dying request." The doctor and priest look at the lawyer and asks, "So your bag had all the money he entrusted you with?" To which he replies, "Damn right. I wrote the check for the full amount, not a penny less." A lawyer had just bought a fancy new car and was eager to show it off to his colleagues when an 18-wheeler came out of nowhere and took off the driver's side door with him standing right there. "No!" he screamed, because he knew that no matter how good a mechanic tried to fix it, it would never be the same. Finally, a cop came by, and the lawyer ran up to him yelling, "My Bentley door was just ruined by some foolish driver." "You're a lawyer, aren't you?" asked the policeman. Yes, I am. But what does that have to do with my car? The lawyer asked. Ha! You lawyers are so materialistic. All you care about is your possessions. I bet you didn't even notice that your left arm is missing, did you? The cop said. The lawyer looked down at his side and exclaimed, My Rolex! A blonde and a lawyer are on a plane, and they're sitting next to each other. The lawyer gets bored and decides to play a game. He asks the blonde to join. The lawyer says, We'll each ask each other a trivia question. If you get it right, you earn $5. If you get it wrong, the other person earns $5. Well, the blonde isn't really interested. She turns away as if to take a nap. The lawyer says, Okay. How about this? If I ask you a question and you get it wrong, you give me $5. But if you ask a question and I get it wrong, I'll give you $100. 0-0. Obviously, now the blonde is interested, so she decides to play. The lawyer asks his question first. What's the distance between the Earth and the Moon? Well, the blonde doesn't know. So she hands the lawyer $5. Now it's the blonde's turn. She asks the lawyer, What goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? The lawyer is stumped. What could possibly go up a hill with 3 legs and come down with 4? He begins to sweat. He starts asking other passengers. He pays for the in-flight internet to email his lawyer friends. Nobody knows. Nobody can help him. Reluctantly, he writes a $100, 0-0, check to the blonde. She smirks, takes his check, pockets it, and turns over, again wishing to get back to her nap. The lawyer shakes her. Hey, wait, he said. What goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? The blonde hands him $5. A husband and wife were arguing over who should brew the coffee each morning. The wife said, You should do it because you wake up first. That way, we don't have to wait for coffee. The husband replied, Well, you're in charge of the cooking, so brewing coffee should be your job. I don't mind waiting. The wife, not missing a beat, said, No, it's your responsibility. And besides, it says in the Bible that the man should make the coffee. The husband raised an eyebrow. Really? I don't believe that. Show me where it says that. Smiling, the wife grabbed the Bible, flipped it open, and pointed to the top of several pages. There, she said triumphantly. Hebrews. Little Johnny had failed his law exam and decided to strike a deal with the professor. Johnny, Sir, do you claim to know everything about law? Professor, of course. Johnny, all right then. If you can answer my question, I'll accept my grade. But if you can't, you'll have to give me an A. Intrigued, the professor agreed. Johnny then asked, What is legal but not logical, logical but not legal, and neither legal nor logical? The professor thought long and hard, but no answer came to him. After hours of pondering, he admitted defeat and reluctantly gave Johnny an A. The next day, determined to solve the puzzle, the professor posed the same question to his class. To his astonishment, every student raised their hand. He called on one of them and repeated the question. The student replied, Sir, you're 65 years old and married to a 28-year-old woman. That's legal but not logical. Your wife is having an affair with a 23-year-old man. That's logical but not legal. And finally, you've given your wife's boyfriend an A after he failed his exam. That's neither legal nor logical. The professor fainted on the spot. A young man named John received a parrot as a gift. This parrot, however, was no ordinary bird. It had a foul attitude and an even fouler mouth. Every word it squawked was rude, obnoxious, and peppered with profanity. John, determined to reform the bird, tried everything. He spoke to it in calm, polite tones, played soothing music, and spent countless hours encouraging better behavior. But nothing worked. One day, after yet another barrage of rude remarks, John finally lost his patience. He yelled at the parrot, but the bird only yelled back, even louder and nastier. Frustrated, John grabbed the parrot and gave it a shake. This only made things worse. The parrot grew angrier and even more offensive. At his wits' end, John decided to try something drastic. He opened the freezer, placed the squawking parrot inside, and shut the door. For the first few moments, the parrot squawked, kicked, and screamed in protest. Then suddenly, there was silence. Not a sound came from the freezer for over a minute. Worried he might have hurt the bird, John quickly opened the door. The parrot stepped out onto John's arm, calm and composed. "I believe I may have offended you with my language and actions," the parrot said with surprising sincerity. "I am deeply sorry for my behavior and assure you I will make every effort to be polite and respectful from now on." John was stunned. He couldn't believe the transformation. As he opened his mouth to ask what had caused such a dramatic change, the parrot leaned in and softly added, "By the way, may I ask what the turkey did?" A dog ran into a butcher shop and grabbed a roast off the counter. Fortunately, the butcher recognized the dog as belonging to a neighbor of his. The neighbor happened to be a lawyer, incensed at the theft. The butcher called up his neighbor and said, "Hey, if your dog stole a roast from my butcher's shop, would you be liable for the cost of the meat?" The lawyer replied, "Of course. How much was the roast?" $7.98. A few days later, the butcher received a check in the mail for $7.98. Attached to it was an invoice that read, "Legal consultation service, $150. A blonde woman was driving about 2 hours outside of San Diego when she noticed a man waving her down on the side of the road. His truck had broken down, and as she pulled over, he approached her car. "Are you heading to San Diego?" he asked. "Sure am," she replied. "Do you need a ride?" "Not for me," the man said. "I'll be here fixing my truck for a while, but I have 2 chimpanzees in the back, and they need to get to the San Diego Zoo. They're already stressed, and I don't want them stuck on the road all day. Would you mind taking them for me? I'll even give you $200 for the trouble." "Of course," the blonde said cheerfully. The man helped secure the 2 chimpanzees in her back seat, made sure they were comfortable, and sent them on their way. Several hours later, as he finally made it into San Diego, the truck driver was stunned by what he saw. There was the blonde, walking down the street, holding hands with the 2 chimps, while a crowd gathered around, laughing and snapping pictures. Slamming on his brakes, he jumped out of his truck and ran up to her. "What on earth are you doing?" he exclaimed. "I gave you $200 to take them to the zoo." "I did take them to the zoo," she said with a smile, "but we had some money left over, so now we're headed to SeaWorld." 3 bulls heard through the grapevine that the rancher was bringing in a new bull. This news didn't sit well with them, so they gathered to talk it over. The first bull, the oldest, spoke up. "Boys, I've been here 5 years. We settled things a long time ago, and I laid claim to my 100 cows. Now, I don't know where this newcomer thinks he's getting his cows from, but it won't be from me." The second bull nodded. "Same here. I've been here 3 years and earned my 50 cows. That new guy better look elsewhere, because I'm keeping all of mine." The youngest bull, just a year into ranch life, puffed up his chest. "I may only have 10 cows, but I worked hard for them. I might not be as big as you 2 yet, but I'm young and determined, and I plan on keeping every one." Just as they finished their bold statements, an 18-wheeler pulled up in the pasture, carrying only one animal, the biggest, strongest bull they had ever seen. At 4,700 pounds, each step he took down the ramp made the steel creak under his weight. The first bull cleared his throat. Fellas, I've been thinking. I might have more cows than I can handle. I could probably share a few." The second bull gulped. Yeah. I've been feeling a little overworked anyway. No harm in making room for the new guy." They both turned to the youngest bull, who was pawing the ground, shaking his horns, and snorting up a storm. The first bull leaned in. Son, take some advice. Let him have a few cows and stay on his good side. The young bull snorted again and said, Heck, he can have all my cows. I just want to make sure he knows I'm a bull. Quick reminder, every 1,000 subscribers and likes equals $100 to help a senior in need. Hit that subscribe button now and be a part of this.